I think the big thing for me and what I've learned in the last, since I've been with my agency is that marketing can't just be on its own, and sales can't be on its own, and human resources can't be on its own. It's kind of has to be this like full ball of wax of like they all have to kind of align.
This is From Paint to Purpose, a podcast by FCP Services, where we believe people drive growth, exploring topics related to company culture, leadership, and construction industry insights. Now your host.
Welcome everybody. Today we have Matt Froehlich. Hi Matt, how are you?
Hi, I'm excellent. How are you?
Good. So I know that you're a content creator. Can you give us a little more about what that means and how you decided to go that path in your career?
Yeah, so I'm a content marketing specialist at a small marketing agency in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's called Bear Performance Marketing. Even before that, I was kind of always screwing around on my own, whether it was making Facebook pages back in college for like a radio show I had, sports radio show, or, using my Twitter platform to leverage some podcasts and Packers content I do now. Always kind of having an interest in like everyone's addicted to their phones. How can you put up more content that way and get people's attention? But a lot of people, like, especially in the podcast world, I'm sure, like you can record a podcast and put it up, but you kind of have to market it a little bit. And I've noticed you do that with your videos and stuff on LinkedIn and et cetera. So that's huge. But then after a while, like I was working jobs I didn't really like. So I always had my eye to getting into a career that I could at least use these in the same capacity. Not tweeting about the Packers, that would be the ultimate goal if I got to get paid a salary to do that. But being able to tweet or make social media content for clients that need that maybe don't have the knowledge of that, maybe have someone on their team that is just, their director of marketing or whatever you want to call that name, and they frankly just don't either have the time or the resources to do that. They might be really good at like Google advertising or copy editing or email campaign or website design, whatever, but like they can't do everything. And that's kind of where our agency comes into play, and I get to create some of that content for them.
What are some examples of content you've created for organizations?
Sure. So my primary position entails me creating monthly calendars for clients, whether it's they have one post a week just out on Facebook, or they have multiple channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and we're doing 5 posts a week. And we're also, obviously, even for the people that have the one post, we're engaging anyone that's commenting, forwarding them an email address that they need to maybe ask some questions, or ideally a contact form to a website where they can learn a little bit more about the client they're asking about and reach out that way, because that's kind of the best way to do it. There's so many legs to the spider web that you can just give them a piece of information, because hopefully either the company or our agency has created enough content out there that it makes it super simple. You don't have to communicate that via a Facebook message or a DM on Instagram. You can just send them a link, little context. If you have any questions, reach out, and normally that's pretty simple. So all in all, I create social media content, and it kind of depends. I would say that's the vast majority. There's some specific stuff we'll do for clients, but generally right now we're just sticking to the calendars. But then we're a small agency, so anything that's kind of asked of me, any like small video editing I can do. I've done some podcasting for us to have some people similar to like what you're trying to do, is just have a conversation with people in the industry or people that have a small business or whatever. So that's something I've done too, but some email marketing along the way, some video production, like I said, business development. So, yeah.
So how does this type of marketing differentiate from like digital or consumer marketing? Sure. How does a company choose what kind of marketing they have to do?
Great question. I think more often than not, they're like, we need to do more marketing. And everyone's probably around the table and they're like, yep, we do. And they have no idea what that looks like. So they start, from what I've observed in my time with Bear, is that companies usually will, ask for referrals. They'll check out, websites for sure. They want to see who you've worked with, what you've done, what projects you've done. So that's important, because in Green Bay, I mean, even Appleton area, obviously it doesn't have to be just super local. You could be partnered with an agency out of Milwaukee. We've come across people that have been partnered with people out of Minneapolis, out of Los Angeles, and they're just like, this doesn't work. They don't understand what we're trying to do. They don't have the same, especially from LA to Northeast Wisconsin, doesn't really equate. So I think when people hear the term marketing, they're not really sure what the hell that means, because like oftentimes businesses around this area are run by people that are like my father's age or my grandfather's age, and they don't really understand what goes into things anymore. They think marketing, some companies still think marketing is like a postcard in the mail. Like they think that's what marketing is, or like a billboard or running a radio ad after the Packer game, or on TV, and like that's great, but those are super expensive. And you talked about like the digital advertising. Like digital advertising, we have someone that works with us, Jake. He runs all the Google campaigns. So we have the search campaigns where people, if you run a metal fabrication shop, that's a lot of clients that we work with. You type in anything related to metal fabrication. Obviously, it's nice to have a client that gives you all the terms that someone would be searching for. You put that into a campaign, and you're going to be able to pop closer on those search terms. And then you can do the paid for search, and then also like the digital ads. So if someone's on a competitor's website, they'll get a retargeting ad later on that they'll see that, click that, and it's just those cookies are following them. So that's more in like the digital space. And I think the term like digital marketing is now becoming even more of like a huge umbrella, because frankly, everything's digital. Like if anything, the last 18 months showed us like people are already using their cell phones and their laptops even more, but now it's like we're even more accustomed to doing like a podcast virtually instead of meeting in person, or having a Zoom meeting instead of driving 30 minutes to see a client and wasting half a day. You can hop on a Zoom call and crank that out in an hour. And I think just digital overall is kind of expanding, and that's frankly to me like what marketing is at this point. There are some of those traditional marketing services that are still applicable if you have a big enough budget, or it depends on what you're trying to sell. Like if it's an event-based situation, that might make more sense to get on radio or TV. But overall, I think marketing is just primarily digital at this point.
What does a successful campaign look like?
A successful campaign has to start with multiple angles. Like you can't just do like a Facebook content for 5 posts a week and maybe even have some digital ads, or have some social ads with that. Like that's not everything just to get them to the website. There needs to be more than that. There needs to be a one-on-one potential, how you're going to connect some dots. So we have a client that it's wild to me too when you talk to these companies. They just don't have these things. Like they needed a sell sheet. They didn't even have a sell sheet. So we had a graphic designer and our content writer kind of collaborate with their sales manager and create a sell sheet. So it's like, okay, now that maybe they found you on the internet, you're meeting them in person, you can actually hand them a piece of an 8x10 or just a little a trifold situation, give that to them. They know what's going on. That's more of a hand shaking hand situation. I think also like I talked about the search ads or the Google advertising, like you need to parlay that to get people to your website. Like most companies either have a website and they're not getting traffic to that, or they have a really bad website and they're getting traffic to that and people aren't staying long enough. So you need to have enough content on your website for people to, like I said, like answer their own questions. Like if they're looking around and they're trying to figure out, is this business going to be able to fulfill what I need? Is this, maybe it's a single person doing some sort of services. Like, can they fulfill this? You need to have enough content out there on a website to do that. And I think websites may or may not get overlooked sometimes when it comes to marketing, because people think you can build a Wix website or a WordPress website, and those are great and all, but I think WordPress is a great tool to use, but it's very template based. So if you're not creating stuff customized, it kind of can look like someone else's. So I would say a successful one has multiple channels. And I knew you were going to ask me this question early on. So I think it's like you need to take inventory of what you're currently doing. If it's one marketing channel, make sure you're doing that really, really well and figure out if you can do something else. So if you have like 4 or 5, like whether it's like an email campaign you're doing, some social media advertising, you have your Google situation going on, and a website, like make sure whatever your goal is, if it's just to drive more traffic, make sure those all align. Make sure you're leveraging those items. If your email campaign is based upon, a monthly blog that someone writes for you. Well, if you're trying to get more sales, maybe have a button that says get a quote, like where you're just kind of using all of those tools to kind of communicate the same way. Because oftentimes, just because I'm on social media a ton doesn't mean Bob down the street is on social media a lot. He might just be a big email user. So make sure you're communicating to him and you can get a wider net. And to be successful, like it's tough. You have to know what you're up against. You and I, when we first met, like we were talking about recruiting and stuff, and that's super hard right now. Like I just started a recruiting campaign on Facebook with a client, and we'll see how that goes. Like it can be really, really tough. Like you could have the best offer in the world, but that's a huge uphill battle. I would say for him right now, if he hires one person off that's a success. So I think it's just where your expectations are set, and hopefully you can match those, exceed those, or even come really damn close.
So, speaking of recruiting, and I know it's been hard and stuff, has your team worked with you to make sure? I know you said you have a campaign going on for recruiting. Has your team been reached out for more campaigns like that for recruiting, where you're like working one-on-one with the HR departments to make sure you get the best candidates possible?
Yeah, so we've had probably in the last 6 months, maybe close to the first of the year, like where people are like, okay, we got through 2020. It was an absolute terrible year, but now we still need to hire people, whether people left because there's this huge, the great resignation is the term I just heard this last week, or you couldn't pay them anymore, you had to lay them off or furlough them. So now we have this huge gap in demand to what we need to have people to do these skilled labor jobs, especially in Northeast Wisconsin. That's big. So yeah, we've had a bunch of companies reach out to us, companies that are in the I guess anything like labor related is super tough. But even not that, like we work with a pediatric dentist around here. They've been trying to hire a dentist they just hired him. It was probably like over a year. And some of that's just location based. Like no one that's going to dental school outside of the state really wants to move to Green Bay, Wisconsin. If you're going to school in like Arizona, you don't really want to move to Green Bay and deal with the cold if you're not used to that. So yeah, we've had a lot of clients reach out to us and do that. It's tough too because it like I said, the demand's super high. So if you're paying for like search terms on Google, that can be really, really expensive to do that. And you might not see a return on that investment of a couple $1,000s. Like that's a tough pill to swallow. And some of it also has to come down to because things are happening so fast internally with an HR person, like they need to be communicating with us, right? They need to say, hey, pause anything related to this job, or I need to add a second position for this one. And so like, if they're not communicating to us, it would be great if we just had a pulse on every single client we work with and we knew when they were having an interview and how the process was going. But if they're not doing that, it's really, really challenging to know if we're missing the mark on things and if they're not getting the right candidate. So that can be a little tricky. But I think it just goes back to making sure your message is out there on a wide scale. And you have to, it's like you have to balance it, right? If you're going to invest a couple $1,000s in recruiting for, let's say, like 2-3 months, well, that might be well worth your investment because you're going to be able to spend or be able to charge or hire a couple people that are going to bring in way more money than that for your company and for your clients and your businesses. So you definitely need to, it's an investment 100%, just like hiring someone is overall. Like even if it's just like they're on your website, so you're hiring, great, cool. But if you're actually trying to get people to fill a void, you need to invest in that and do that and understand that it might not work. And to, I guess, referrals are great. That's one great way. If you have people internally that can tell you, hey, this person can hire, and that's a lot easier and still kind of like that old school mentality to get that done.
The analytics part of, I want to talk about the analytics part of it.
Sure.
A lot of people think that marketing is just creating this really beautiful content that you can just spread everywhere. But, there's a back end. You have to make sure you target the correct audience. What does that look like?
Oh, man. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of people in marketing that are very creative have exceptional skills when it comes to graphic design or like the Adobe Suite or motion graphics or anything like that. But if it's not gaining results, it's kind of a waste. Like if you're putting some content out and you're not observing how your social ads are doing or your web traffic is going, like everyone's gonna lose. Like the creator's gonna not know if their graphics great or their video. Your agency as a whole for us is going to lose because you have nothing to present to a client to say, hey, this is, since we started August 1st, this is what happened, and then now we stopped it 6 weeks in, and your web traffic went significantly down. So, and then the client's obviously losing because they're paying for that content to be created, and then they don't know what's going on. So everything that we do from our digital side, from the social media advertising I do, I come up with a report every month for clients and send that to them. We have a software that's able to kind of generate a PDF from 12 to 20 pages. I kind of trim that down and then also just give them like a synopsis of a breakdown of like, here's what you want to look at, here's what went well, here's what didn't go well. It kind of compares it from month to month, which is good and bad. You at least know like, okay, we did better than last month, we did worse. But then like it doesn't really show you on a full scale. You have to kind of like extrapolate that content. And then from the Google side and like website side, it's pretty obvious to us if and when a client's going to stop their search campaign, because it's 100% going to go down. Like there's no doubt, whether it goes down by 5 clicks a month to 5 clicks a day. Like if you're not putting some sort of budget into Google, you're definitely just going to get lost out on the internet. And we have, again, same thing, analytics reports every month that we put out. We can even get that data if someone's requesting it. Like I want to know if my web traffic went up during this week because I did a TV and radio campaign I didn't tell you guys about, but I want to see if it worked really well. So if you're not at least for your internal use, checking out what's going on and if it's going really, really well or bad, I think that sucks. And then for the client side, obviously they're losing because all that time invested, they don't really know what's working. And you can't even tell them, like, without a doubt, like, hey, you could tell someone that, like, you're getting to their careers page, right? Their /careers page, and you got 10,000 clicks in a month, but no one clicked on, like, the apply now button. I mean, maybe it's just a content thing once they get to that page. Like, hey, maybe we need to, what's the offer? Are we talking about our culture enough on here that people are really going to want to hear about or feel that it's different from the other, tons of companies that are hiring. So I think the toughest thing for us is we can get you very, very, very close to like connecting a dot and like making a return on your investment. But like, you have to take into consideration everything. Like people are people. If they get to a website and they don't feel that it's exactly what they want, they can go look elsewhere. And with the demand right now, it can be tough to compete with that.
So, what recommendations do you give for a company when they get that analytics report? What should be their focus on? What's important?
Yeah, I would think depending what you're doing. So if it's just Google search, I would look at a month-to-month basis how many clicks we're getting to the website. Also, what search terms are coming up most. Sometimes the search terms you think that people are going to type in aren't exactly what the customer's going to type in. I think, or the potential hire or whoever. So that's interesting, I think, to take a look at. We have like a ranking system. I think it's all the search terms will go in, and I mean, there's generally the same ones that you would expect, but sometimes people are searching things in a different way than you would expect. So I think it's great to take inventory of the search terms that people are searching. There's also data that you can look at least for us. I don't know if other companies or with their websites or whatever, you can see how long they're on a website. So if you're getting 10,000 people to click to your, .com/careers, but then they're leaving within like 5 seconds, like something's wrong. Like either maybe the load time on the website sucks, or maybe something when they're getting there isn't appealing to them. Like, I think that's something to take into consideration too. So I would say how they're getting there, whether it's just a straight Google search, they could be coming over from some other supplemental content. Like I mentioned, it could be from an email link, it could be from a social media campaign link. It could be from, like they're just seeing where they're coming from, I think is important. How they got there, what terms they're using on Google, and then how long they're staying there, I think is super important. Sometimes those numbers can be a little bit underwhelming. Like if you're getting 10,000 people to your site and only 100 of them like click the apply now, it seems not that great, but in reality, like that can kind of be the average, especially within the recruiting space that we've come to find out.
So from 10,000, 100, and then from 100, you get one applicant?
Yeah. I mean, that can be the case. Like, it truly can. Like, now I would say the 100 is probably, I guess, let's say 100 of people applied. I would hope there's more than one qualified person that you want to hire. But, I mean, that could be worth it. If you're running a campaign for 6 weeks and you paid, let's just say $5,000 to do that, like, that could be worth your investment depending on what this person can do. Now, if it's something that really doesn't take more than a high school degree, background isn't all that necessary, and skills that they've acquired aren't that great, it might not be worth your time. But if you're trying to find someone that's in some skilled labor situation that has maybe 5-10 years of experience with another company, I think that's worth your investment. But I would say if you go from 10,000 views to 10,000 clicks to 100 applicants, I would hope you'd get more than a couple, because that would mean I would think then that means your search terms are off, or where you're putting that message isn't really hitting the mark.
Mm-hmm. I want to switch gears a little,
sure,
and talk about culture. How can
Okay.
marketing help with company culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. We partnered with a client of ours, and we've been really thriving with them. But their first issue they were having, again, this kind of goes towards the I guess the age gap or the knowledge gap. They were just like, we have bad Google reviews. It's like, okay. And they're like, no, they're like really bad. I'm like, okay. They're like, well, like, what did you guys do? They're like, oh no, it's not from customers or people. It's like literally from former employees that are writing bad Google reviews. So, like, to overcome that is tough, right? You have to get more Google reviews or whatever. But like, all in all, they were having a cultural issue from what they told us, and I think that was fair. I think there was a disconnect, oftentimes from sales to the labor side of things. There can be a competitive nature. There can be something that just doesn't really jive. There's always like this animosity once in a while that like, you're not working hard enough to make me more money, but like, you're making a commission off what I'm doing. It's kind of like that can be a tough balance to have. But culturally, I think within marketing, something that we've noticed, and I think a lot of companies do, are like video testimonials or highlighting employees, having some sort of, whether it's a holiday party for them or a spring get together at some, I don't know, minor league baseball game or basketball game, like a company outing. So I think those things are huge. A lot of that, I mean, there's a client that we met with a couple months ago towards the middle of the summer that these guys are working it's an asphalt company, and they're working hard, man. They're out in the elements all day, every day. It's hot as hell out, but like, they provide them food. Like, literally, they get to the shop at 6 a.m. and there's whatever they want. She said that some guys just want a Mountain Dew and beef jerky. Some guys want like a banana and stuff to take with them. So like, they've literally just invested like a couple $100 a week just so guys and girls are, fed before they get on the road. And like, that has nothing to do with marketing, really. I mean, you're kind of marketing, I guess, like internally, but really like, that's just like making people feel good, like people that are appreciated. So I think if you're doing those things, talk about them. Like, feel free to have someone that's a little bit more polished, write a blog or get interviewed for a blog and put that out. Have a video out on there. And I think with social media, it's really easy to do those things, and some people can be intimidated by those. But I think if people are talking about your company from within, that just says a lot, because on the outside, as an agency, we can we can talk and kind of polish some things and put some fluff on and some spin on some stuff that's may or may not be hitting the mark. But if you can have someone internally talking about those things and saying, hey, this is why you want to work for XYZ company because they do this, and then have your employees advocate for them, whether it's, you know, upper management or it's the opposite side of the, you know, the building, the sales team, or, you know, the reverse. I think that's huge because that's the culture that people want to work in. At least I want to work in where it's everyone's part of the team. There's not a different, you know, division and everything's separate. I think you want to know that you're appreciated. And if it costs a couple $100 a day to get someone some beef jerky and a soda, like, I think that's totally worth your time, because otherwise they leave and you have to rehire, and that couple $100, like we mentioned, goes to thousands of dollars in a couple weeks.
So I do have to ask, what would be your preferred snack?
My preferred snack in the morning? I'm usually just a coffee and banana person. I bring my own. So
Okay.
Lunches once in a while are nice. Any food I don't really turn down. Pizza's kind of overplayed. Like, pizza, I feel like when I've worked in companies where it's like, we're just going to bring in pizza. It's like, yeah, you did that last weekend. Like, so that's when I was selling cars, so that wasn't all that great. But I think, anything that's like not overly where I'm going to be fatigued after eating it, right? Like a big sub, like that I'm probably going to get lethargic. So anything that can just be somewhat sustainable for the rest of the day.
So I guess changing subjects here, how has your industry changed in the last year and a half, 2 years now, coming up with COVID and everything? How has your industry changed?
That's a great question. Like, because I started with Bear in January of 2020, end of January 2020. So I was literally there for 6 weeks, and then the country just was shutting down. Like, I was listening to the news kind of that second week in March and throughout the day and checking Twitter. I'm a huge Twitter fiend. So like, I'm like, oh shoot, like college basketball tournaments are getting shut down. They're stopping flights from these countries to these countries. Oh, now states, you know, especially like Florida or California or New York or Chicago, specifically closer to us, they were getting shut down. And I think it exposed a lot of deficiencies within communication, whether it was on, if your website really sucked, like that's what people are relying on now. Like, you can't go into a sales meeting with someone and, you know, grab lunch with them or coffee and talk to them face to face. Like, you need to be able to either send an email with an attachment, like a sell sheet, like I mentioned, or a hyperlink for them to be able to get to a services page or whatever. And like, if you didn't have that, you were kind of lost. Like, if you don't have a Google campaign running, like, people didn't know how to find you anymore, because if you're facilitating those more of like an old school mentality of like handshaking and meeting people and networking, like, you were kind of stuck. And I think some of our clients really thrived during that time, especially in the manufacturing space. Some clients that were strictly like event based, whether it be like shows or sporting events, they took a huge loss. Like, both of the clients specifically I'm thinking of were able to still stay afloat, but that's because they either have a really good foundation of a business. They know how to run a business. They're not, you know, just getting by, or some are affiliated, especially the sporting events, like affiliated with a bigger league that was able to sustain them and hold them afloat. So I would say the way it's changed is we took more inventory of clients that maybe didn't have these resources that they needed, whether it was maybe we're not operating their website, but now it's like, okay, you obviously saw, like, that's where the trend is going, and it's still kind of stayed that way. Like, I don't think we're going to really go back on certain things that we've got accustomed to. Like, there's a lot of people that have probably been getting, you know, groceries dropped off to their house the last 18 months. Like, why would I ever go to the grocery store anymore? Like, there's just so many things, like, that we're just going to become reliant on. And I think communication virtually like this is super big. Like, we were doing, for us just internally, we already, for our team, we already had Microsoft Teams, and we would use the chat feature on that. But all of a sudden, we just started having virtual meetings like every week. Or if we had something that was super important, especially like when we started working from home, that we needed to talk about, that a client was having an issue with, we would just hop on that. And that was, I think if you don't have an internal communication with your own staff, that was definitely, I mean, that was for sure an issue we saw with some of our clients. And we can help you with a little bit of that, but that's more of like a you thing. But if you're trying to communicate to potential other businesses or, potential customers, like if you don't have those things in line with all your digital components, like you were kind of lost. And that kind of comes with people like not being ready to adapt to certain changes. And no one could have predicted what happened, right? No one thought we'd be still 18 months out plus and still dealing with some of these things and starting to increase again, it looks like. But I think if anything showed us, like, be prepared. Know that if all of a sudden you had to work from home for a full year, like, what does that look like? Do you have an internal process to how to communicate other than, your landline cell phones or your emails? Like, I think a lot of that is just like knowing that you can rely on some certain aspects of your business that you've invested money in, right? Because it costs a lot of money to operate a website, to put out content. So make sure that content's polished enough that if someone is on their cell phone, even, an increase, I know I was back in the spring, make sure they're finding you on the digital side.
How do you stay informed of new industry trends?
Social media, I would say. A lot of Twitter. There's a couple accounts I follow that will put out content that I'm like, especially recently with like even like iOS update stuff. Back in June, I'm an iPhone user, so back in June, the Facebook Pixel was really not supported anymore by iOS, which you talked about analytics, like that definitely saw a drop in how you're monitoring web traffic. So like the Facebook Pixel is a piece of code you put on a website. If an iPhone user goes there, it's going to track them, just like the digital ads we talked about. So later on, they're going to see this ad when they're back on Facebook or any other website. So that we knew that was coming down the pipeline probably April, early May. But I think it's there's a lot of information out there of like marketing trends or stuff. But I think you have to kind of decipher what you're going to listen to and who you're going to listen to. So and I think it's awesome for me and specifically our agency to be in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where like we can see trends coming from bigger companies or bigger cities, where it's like we can see this coming. We don't have to be at the forefront of it. We can kind of like see it off in a distance and kind of prepare for something to happen, which I'm sure isn't the case in bigger cities. Like it's tougher to the businesses you work with are moving so fast and they're at the cutting edge that you need to be prepared to make a transition. Or on the opposite side, it's like they maybe not be at the cutting edge of everything, but you can see a trend coming. So I would say Twitter is a big thing. Any social media, certain articles, obviously, that are out on the internet that I'll read. I think those are good. But and then I try to stay in contact. I have some friends of mine from college that are in marketing as well. Some other connections I've made along the way at networking events that on LinkedIn they're sharing content or they're putting information out. And a lot of it, to be honest, is trial and error. Like there's some stuff that I was doing like on my own like years ago with like Facebook pages and stuff like that, where I was promoting myself that way. And all of a sudden I log on to Facebook. I actually just noticed that yesterday. There's a podcast feature now on Facebook. You can connect with an RSS feed. Like, will people use that? I don't know. It's an option to try it. So like I feel like sometimes there's just these certain updates that you see like, shoot, I'll give it a spin. Unfortunately, like there's stuff like Twitter Fleets that was, I think, a thing for like 3 months. People don't use it anymore. Like so you have to be selective with what things you're going to invest time in and like learn, because you could put a kind of campaign around something or at least a strategy for a month and all of a sudden it's not there anymore and you have to adjust on the fly. So I think a lot of it's just trial and error, because there's, on the social side of things, those things are changing so quickly that like give it a spin, maybe on your own, maybe with our own company's social pages, try those out. And if it works, okay, let's see if it works for another client.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that we didn't discuss?
I think the big thing for me and what I've learned in the last, since I've been with my agency, is that marketing can't just be on its own, and sales can't be on its own, and human resources can't be on its own. It kind of has to be this like full ball of wax of, like, they all have to kind of align. They have to, if you don't have, I think there was someone said, like, if you don't have like 2 out of the 3, you're kind of failing. If you have 1 out of 3, there's no way it's going to work together. 3 out of 3 is great. But I believe that there needs to be, if you're working with an agency like ours, there needs to be some sort of internal champion, like to call that person, that's communicating with us. If you're fortunate enough to have your own marketing department of someone that's really, really good at digital content, social media, graphic design, content creation, content editing, or traditional media even too, like that's fantastic. That's wonderful. But odds are you're probably going to need someone to do some sort of video content, or find someone that can do some sort of audio production, because you can try to get away with it internally and do that, and maybe you have some really, really talented people, but I think it's important to understand where your deficiencies are at, and if you need to outsource those, do that. Some people might not know how to build a website or update a website or run a server for a website. So I think just take inventory of where you're at with your marketing team. I think a lot of them are director of marketing, and there's like a marketing assistant, and like that's it from what I've observed. So understand where you need to do that. Make sure those things are aligning with your sales managers or your salespeople, what they need, what their asks are being, because what you think as a marketing person might not align with them. And then talk to an HR person if they're having an issue with recruiting, or if, like we don't have any open positions right now. We're great. We're even getting applicants coming in that we can kind of have a roster of people to build from potentially. That's awesome. But let's now that we've had this, like, we don't have a void in employment, let's make sure we're marketing to those people internally. Let's see if they want to do some video. So I would say that just everything needs to align together. It's, like I said, the sales side, the marketing side, the HR side. If you're set with your employment and you have if you have applications coming in, even to fill some positions that maybe you have just a bad employee, you're like, hey, we could fill it with this person, like that would be great. But I think once things are, I don't think it's a cruise control thing if on either side. If sales are great and your social marketing or your digital marketing is getting traffic to your website and it's generating sales, awesome. If HR is set with their employees, awesome. But like, I think you can always take inventory of what you're doing, be prepared for the worst things to come, because things are changing so quickly that maybe your services aren't up to the cutting edge anymore. Invest into those. So I think it's something that you always should be able to continuously improve at.
So how can our audience connect with you?
You can connect with me on Twitter at Matt_FRA_. That's where I do most of my personal damage and kind of leverage our business a little bit. But I would say for BPM, you can connect with us on all social platforms, just at Bear PM, BAER PM. You can check out our website, bearpm.com. We put out a weekly blog. If you're interested in that, that's some content we produce. It's under the free knowledge tab. You can subscribe through our email list too, so that'll drop into your inbox every Thursday evening. Sometimes it's about recent updates like we talked about, whether it be like iOS or different features on social. Sometimes it can be overall campaign discussion, how to do drip marketing, how to make sure you're taking full advantage of like Google My Business features. So that's some free information there. But yeah, if you have any questions, you can email me too, matt@baerpm.com. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter like all the time. Like even in this short little break we took, I was on there refreshing stuff, seeing what was going on. So yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone that has any questions about whatever that means, social media, marketing, the Packers. I'm all ears.
I did want to ask about that. Tell me about your podcast.
My podcast? So
yes.
I'm doing 2 podcasts right now. One I've been a part of for would be like 1,100 episodes thus far. I don't put out an episode every day, but our team collectively puts out an episode every day. So we've done that for 1,100 plus episodes. My episode now comes out on every Saturday. I do it with 2 guys by the name of Jason and Paul. It's called Pack-A-Day Podcast. Is our full affiliated podcast. You can catch it anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's like 20 to 40 minutes a day, kind of giving you on the updates. lowlights possibly or highlights. Right now we kind of just focus on, when it's on Saturdays, focusing on like injuries, anything that's going into the weekend to know about, last minute things, weather report, that's super important. I've come to find out with the two guys I'm now recording with, so that's been fun. I also work with a company, like a startup situation called Game On Wisconsin, and we put out mostly Packers content at this point, and I work on a podcast that comes out every Friday called The Final Dump. It's kind of a play on words when it's like the news dump of the week, right? Like what has happened since the final whistle on the Sunday night or the Monday night game to Friday morning. Like, what do you need to know before you get into the weekend and kind of make yourself a little more educated? Because there's all those people, myself included, love to talk Packers, but I'll be out and about and I hear people talking about the Packers. I'm like, oh geez, that's a little cringeworthy. That person doesn't play there anymore. You don't actually know what happened. So I think it's something that people can just educate themselves with, and it's kind of the synopsis for the week. Anyone that got injured in practice, things to look forward to for the weekend, any matchups that are important. But you can find all that content at Game On Wisconsin or Game On WI across all social platforms. I think if you just type in Game On Wisconsin, it comes into Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, so you can check that out there. And the same with Pack-A-Day Podcasts. We're on all platforms as well.
And finally, what advice can you give someone that wants to start their own podcast?
I actually have a blog I wrote. It's called How to Start a Podcast for Free, basically. So there's a blog you can... If you have any questions, I can email that to you. I've definitely tweeted out a few times. I think it's actually in my LinkedIn article somewhere in there. If you scroll across, I have it saved in there. So I think, it can be overwhelming. I think the best thing to do, don't think you need to invest in a ton of equipment. If you have a stagnant spot like you do, it looks like you have a setup, that's great. But if you're kind of on the move and you need to take it to the office and stuff, I just have a blue snowball microphone, $60. That was the most thing I had to invest. Obviously a laptop to edit and record off of, but
right.
Software is really, really cheap. I think hosting a podcast is basically free or inexpensive. But come up with have a game plan. If you have a few episodes you can bank and kind of have in your back pocket. Stay consistent, have a story that you want to tell, and then just you have to be passionate about it. The Packers I'm super passionate about, and that makes it really, really simple. So overall, I would say just, be passionate about what you're doing and continue to stay consistent with it, because it's really, really easy to start, for the first month, a podcast, and all of a sudden life gets in the way, and all of a sudden 2-3 months later, you're like, I haven't put out a podcast in 2-3 months. So stay consistent. And just, observe what other people are doing on podcasts too, because that's how you learn.
Well, Matt, we appreciate your time and giving us your knowledge of everything marketing and podcasting. We really appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah. No, this is awesome. Thank you for having me on. It was a great time, and I hope there's a tidbit of information along the way that someone will take.
Yep, definitely.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, visit fcpservices.com. Until next time, remember, people drive growth.